So I was taking a roll. I think I have everyone on their roll for now. So during the break, I'll be going through anything that you all need some clarification on. But as you all saw by now, today we are starting narrative writing, a short story, which is the last type of writing in paper 2. And we established last week that paper 2 has the summary writing. Yes, Sanjay?
Are we gonna write one today?
If you're gonna write a short story today, you're not gonna write a short story today. Next week, you'll be writing a short story for me, yes?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I took your suggestion that she gave me. So next week we'll be practicing that. So today we started.
Oh, the one I wrote one for you already.
No, the suggestion that you told me about everybody do it at the same time.
Oh, that.
Yeah. Because remember you
I also did one.
Oh, okay. That's very good. So next week you'll be writing for me during our class session. So I'll be timing that as well. So today is just the informative class where I'll be doing a lot of talking, and I hope that you all do a lot of asking of questions so that we can clarify anything. But from next week you'll be actually starting to write for me, right? And how it will go is that Sanjay made a good recommendation. Thank you, Sanjay, by the way. Where I let you all, like during class, I let you all pause for a little bit. And well, since you're all on your phones, if you want to write it out, I give you all like about 20 minutes or 15 minutes to write an introduction, 10 minutes. Then maybe I give you all like 40 minutes or half an hour to see how far you could write, how much you could write on a story and whatnot. So from next week, I'll be timing you all. We'll start with the baby steps. We'll start with like writing the introduction first, then the introduction and the first paragraph and stuff. So from next week, you'll be writing for me. I'll be timing you all. And then when I say time is up, I will be randomly calling you all because thanks to Zoom, I get to see everyone who's participating. So I'll be randomly calling you all for someone to read what they wrote for me. So this is the last type of writing where we started in paper 2. So we did summary writing, we did expository writing, and argumentative writing, so narrative writing, which to me is a lot of fun. A lot of you all are worried about it because of the word limit. And for those of you who don't know, and I hope while class is going on, you're making additional notes as well in your notebook, right? So for those of you who don't know, the word limit for the narrative writing is 400 to 450 words. Yeah, so breathe out, take a deep breath, because I know Ravi is probably catching a heart attack right now.
I wish it was longer.
You wish it was longer? I'm very positive that Ravi.
Oh, you trying to give yourself a fortune? It's quite soft.
Cool, Sanjay.
Hey, calm yourself, bro.
I think that Ravi rolled his eyes and got a mini heart attacks when I said the word limit was 400 to 450. That's so, Ravi?
You have no idea.
So I'm very so Ravi, are you over the word limit now? You digested? Everybody else digesting the word limit is 400 to 450 words, right? So don't be alarmed.
Miss, I'm still trying to mentally come to terms with it.
Don't be too alarmed. When we go through all the elements and stuff today, you would understand why the word limit is 400 to 450 words. And when we actually begin writing and going through the different paragraphs and what is required of you, then you would understand. And then you'll be like Sanjay and you'll be like, Miss, the word limit should be more. So 400 to 450 words, if you're checking it like on a folder page, it will be 2 folder pages back and front. So depending on how big you write, it could be a folder page back and front and an entire 3rd page. Or if you write really big, maybe it will be 4 pages, right? So it all depends on the size of your writing. But when we go through all the different elements today and what is required of you, then you'll be like, I think that this word limit is too short. So if you all have any questions while I'm explaining, please let me know. So we're starting today with just an overview about narrative writing, and we'll be going through all the important elements of the short story. And what I want you all to note is that every element of the short story that is listed on this handout, you are required to memorize them and every element must be incorporated in your short story. So whatever you see on this handout today, all those things must be covered when you're writing a short story. So you'll see that your handout so far is 5 pages long, right? Which means that it's 5 pages of explanations and things that, you know, areas that you must cover in your final short story. So let's start with an overview. So what is a narrative? I'm sure that you'll remember narrative writing, or you were exposed to it before from primary school when you had to write little short stories and stuff. But now the writing is a bit advanced because we're at the CSEC level. So just a basic definition as to what is a narrative. Narrative is a primary act of the human mind. So a narrative is like a story, right? Is a normal act of the human mind, because many of us, we doze off and we could create stories, or we could read, or we could tell a story. Some of us are really good at making up stories, right? So it's something that comes natural to us because it's easy for us to just think about something and be creative and just experiment. Even many of us, when we lie down to sleep, sometimes we fabricate, or we make up dreams in our head, and we paint out our narrative like however we want the end result to be, right? So it's really normal for us to make up stories and have the introduction, the beginning, and the end to our stories. So throughout our lives, we create or we make narratives out of our immediate or direct experience. So we use our experiences in life to, you know, to ponder on them, and then we'll be able to reproduce a story. So you'll see that many of the, when you start writing your stories, a lot of the things that you write is because it's from an experience, either direct or indirect experience, that you were exposed to. Even our dreams. So in our dreams, as I said before, when we lie down to sleep, we could think about anything. Our story could just start off at one spot and end up in a whole different country. The next thing is television dramas. So many of you all, depending on the question, maybe you would use a scenario or a TV show, and you may write or reproduce a story that's similar to what happened in a TV show. Even public events, news stories. So news stories, because maybe if you were asked to write about a kidnapping or something, you could make reference to something that you heard on the news about a kidnapping beforehand. Or routine happenings. So everyday things like maybe the story requires you to write something about an incident that took place when you went to the bank. So regular routine things that you will encounter on a day-to-day basis. So some purposes of a narrative. The narrative has 3 major purposes. So the first one is to develop our understanding and control of a range of narrative forms, in particular the short story. So narratives could be in various forms. So some forms that maybe you were exposed to when you were younger is that one that we are all accustomed with is the diary, the personal narrative. So maybe when we were younger, we had a diary and we used to record, you know, our day-to-day happenings. We were writing our journal. So there are different narrative forms, but for CXA, we will be focusing on the short story, which we will be exploring throughout the latter half of this handout. So the next purpose of the narrative is to increase critical awareness of literary techniques. So remember when we did poetry and stuff, we were exposed to different literary devices. And then when I gave you the poetry handout, we were exposed to different techniques like imagery, the different types of imagery. So in a narrative or a short story, I must see you exercising some literary techniques. So maybe in a story, you could one of your descriptions could be in the form of a simile or a metaphor, a hyperbole, a personification. So, and even visual imagery. So you would describe what you're seeing, auditory imagery, what you're hearing. So I must see some literary techniques being employed in your stories. And the third major purpose is to develop a love and appreciation of narrative through the experience and pleasure in reading. And this point is very important because the reality is when you're in the exam is a timed exam, and you just have like 50 minutes to create a story. Many of us, if we read a lot of novels, we will be at an advantage because depending on what the question asks of us, we could just make reference to something that we read in a novel beforehand, and then we could just make a few adjustments and reproduce that same story, but just, you know, from our version. But what I tend to see is that a lot of students who don't read novels, and this is why I told you all from the beginning that you all need to start reading short stories, read novels, because a lot of students who don't read novels, they get a lot of difficulties when it comes to interpreting the questions and even just being creative and thinking outside the box and thinking about what to write. So if you know that you haven't been reading a lot of short stories or novels, now is a good time for y'all to start. Because maybe in the exam you could use some phrases that you saw in a story that you read. You could use some of the vocabulary. You could even use the entire concept, what the short story was about, and you could recreate that story into your own way. So try to develop a deep love and appreciation for narrative writing by doing your own reading when it comes to novels and short stories, because it really helps you, and that's how we expand our thinking and our creativity, our vocabulary, and the expressions and phrases that we use. We really expand this and incorporate it into our lexicon when we read other people's or other writers' works, and then we try to borrow a phrase from them or a word from them, and then we adjust it, twist it around, and we make it into our own version. So it's good for you all to start doing some reading, right? So if you know you haven't been reading, the coronavirus has you all at home, so now is a good time for you all to go on your bookshelf. Well, first dust out all the cobweb from the bookshelf, because you all haven't been reading at all. So dust out all the books and start to read a chapter, right? Start to read something. Yeah, Maria, I know exactly what you'll do when you're home, and I know exactly the condition your storybooks are in. If any of us still have storybooks, because we tend to throw them away as soon as we get it, or we re-gift them. So, try to find the storybooks and start to read them from now until the exam. Because that's how my own writing has improved as well, from reading a whole bunch of different writers. What I do is that if I see a phrase or expression that I like that I saw in someone else's novel, I would write it down or try to memorize it, and then when I am writing my own stories, I would remember what someone else wrote, and then I would incorporate that into my own story. So it's good. Good afternoon, Stefan. So it's good for you all. So it's good for you all to start to read other people's work, because you really get preview into how people write, and it helps you when it comes to coming up with creative ideas that you could write about. So that was just an overview as to what is a narrative. So now we're going to get into what we're here for, which is this short story that you all will be required to reproduce in just 50 minutes in 400 to 450 words in the exam. So the short story is a literary genre. So it's a literary genre because in literature we have different genres like poetry, we have drama, and we have prose, which will fall under the short story. So the drama will be things like plays, the poetry will be poems, and prose will be like novels or short stories. So the short story is a literary genre which belongs to the realm of prose fiction. So prose fiction, anybody knows what the word fiction means? Prose has to do with essay writing in paragraph form. So anything you read that's written in a paragraph or essay format, that's considered prose. But anybody knows what's fiction? Yes, Andrew?
Is it a synonym for fiction? I mean, not fiction, imaginary.
Good. So many of the things that, and thanks for bringing up that, yes, it is a synonym for imaginary as well, because fiction has to do with things that are usually fake, right? So when you all read novels and stuff, I'm sure that many of the things that you all read don't exist in the real world. So that's what I mean by prose fiction, because you all are because even the movies that we see on television and cinemas and stuff, they emerge from novels, from prose fiction that persons write. So like for instance, many of us were following the Game of Thrones series, but in reality we don't have dragons, all these things don't exist, but this is just to show you how creative people could be. And when you're writing, you also try to write in a creative way where eventually, someone could read your work and want to create like a movie or TV series from it. So not everything that you write will be based on a real life experience. If you want, you could write about something that is fiction or fake, something that's imaginary, and something that doesn't exist in the real world. So if you write like that, then it shows how creative you could be. Because I'm sure even when you all see movies with things that don't exist in the real world. You're like, wow, how did this person sit and come up with this idea? Like they're probably really creative, and they probably really think outside the box. So I'm sure there were some movies that had you all marveling like that, where you all were just amazed that one person even came up with this concept, because this was so out of the box and unreal and surreal for you all. And then we tend to love the works that are like that. So unlike the novel form, so a novel is, so we know novels are like usually books, right? So novels are extremely long. Some novels could be up to 400, 500 pages. But a short story is not a novel, because a short story is shorter than a novel. Hence the reason why you'll have the word limit of 400 to 450 words. Because in the exam, they don't ask you to write a novel. They just ask you to write a short story of 400 to 450 words. So unlike the novel form, it is shorter and more compact or condensed. So instead of writing an entire novel and spending 500 pages to say one idea, in the exam you're required to make it more condensed. So you're required to make it shorter, and that you have to have that same effect where you will tell an entire story, but you're doing it in only 400 to 450 words. So like in novels, people use hundreds of thousands of words, but in the exam you only have 400 to 450 words to have the same impact on the reader. So the writer works with a smaller canvas, fewer characters. So in the short story, we will be exploring characters as well. So you have less characters as opposed to how many characters you'll have in a novel. Fewer incidents. So maybe your story will have like 1 or 2 incidents taking place for the most because of the word limit. Less elaborate settings. So you can't really expand too much on setting. You would have to condense it. Everything all the elements that we'll be discussing today, you can't really elaborate on it as if you were writing an entire novel. You have to make it, it will be reduced. Less dialogue. So yes, Sanjay?
In the exam, when I was writing my short story, I had put 700 words and then I had to rewrite it.
Wow, you had time to rewrite it?
Yeah, I forgot the word limit.
I'm gonna leave it.
Why? They want to correct the rest.
Yeah, but were you able to finish the entire paper after rewriting that?
Yeah, it only took a page and a half.
I could imagine your handwriting. Because in the exam, if I wrote 750 words, there was no way I was going to rewrite that entire thing. I would just be reading each paragraph and scratching off lines.
I did my paper backwards.
Oh, that's why. Okay. Well, you are blessed. Not everybody could do that. So you'll have less dialogue and a single theme. So we'll be exploring theme, and the theme is like the central idea of whatever the story is about, right? So the story gives pleasure through the writer's craft and adds meaning through the experiences shared with the reader. So it's really good. Sometimes we use our own personal experiences to write about, or we even make up experiences, right? But it's really, because it's a human correcting a paper, it'll be more relatable, and the person can actually appreciate it if you use like real life instances that they could relate to. But they would even appreciate more if you be creative and you write about something that's imaginary, because that's something that's out of the box, and it's not too cliche. It's not something that we see all the time. So it says in this unit, you will experience a short story as a coherent unit which integrates various elements. So as I said before, throughout this document, we'll be going through the different elements, and just know that all these elements that are listed here must be included in your short story. So the first thing is plot. Then we have setting, point of view, style, characters, dialogue, and theme. So all these 7 elements, we will be discussing them in depth now. So before we start discussing the elements, you'll have any questions thus far about the short story?
No, me está good.
Okay. Just in case our video cuts off at 40 minutes, you all know what you have to do, right? You just rejoin the meeting afterwards. Good. So let's explore the first element. And this element, I really want you all to listen to this element, because sometimes it's easy to get a bit lost with what they're saying. So this element is probably the most important element of the short story. And that's why I have it first, right? So if at any point in time you don't understand anything, just stop me and I'll go through it again. So the first thing is plot. Plot is the string which holds the story together. So this is by far the most important element of the short story. It's an element that we all need to understand so that we could when we're writing our story, we can have an excellent plot. Because if you don't have an excellent plot, then your story is not going to be a good story. That's basically the reality of it. If you don't have a good plot, your story will never be good. So it must capture the attention of the reader and create curiosity. So I said that a lot of movies were incorporated or they were produced out of books, right? So you ever watch a movie and then within the first minute of the movie, you could tell that this plot or the storyline is not going to be a good one. It's extremely boring. And then you turn out the movie. The same thing goes for when you're actually writing, right? So when the examiner or when I read the first two lines of your story, it must be written so well where I intrigued and I want to continue reading. And this will go with your plot, right? So your plot must capture the attention of the reader and it needs to create curiosity. Because a story that is very predictable, it wouldn't create that much curiosity. Just as if you were watching a movie and within the first 5 minutes, you know exactly how the movie is going to end and what's going to happen. Those types of movies aren't really exciting, right? So your writing should be like that. So the who, what, when, and where questions are usually answered in the plot. So if you want to know about plot, what to include in the plot, you have to mention the who, what, when, and where. So in the plot, there's an event which causes a change of fortune, and this event starts the plot moving. So the change of fortune, what we know fortune to be? What do you think the last line means? In the plot, there is an event which causes a change of fortune, and this event starts the plot moving.
It gives the reader, makes the reader want to read it more.
Good. So I'll use the movie, but I'm paralleling the movies with the stories because I know you all don't really read that much stories, right? So yeah, ever watch a movie and everything is just going good, and then bam, shot, something exciting happen that just builds your curiosity, and you're like, wow. And that's the point in the movie where you don't want to move, you just want to sit and watch out the rest of the movie because you didn't see that coming, and all the excitement just emerges. So that's exactly how your story will be, right? So in order for that to happen, we need to understand the different stages of the plot. So the first one is the exposition. So and you all need to memorize these stages in this particular order because this is the order in which your story must be written. So the first one is the exposition, the setting of the story, and the introduction of characters. So the exposition is usually the beginning of the story. And from reading novels or even short stories, you will see that in the very beginning, so the first paragraph, they would paint a picture for you of the setting of the story. And then they would introduce characters to you slowly in the beginning of the story. Then the second stage in the plot is the complication. So this is the introduction of the problem and the growing seriousness of the rise in action. So everything's going good in the introduction, and the setting is introduced, the characters are introduced, and then we're introduced to some sort of complication. So some kind of obstacle the person has to overcome or some drama is going to take place. And after we're introduced to that, then we have the climax. So the tension in the story increases to a moment of high drama as the character is put under pressure. So the climax in the story is the part in the movie where we don't want to move. Even if we have to go to the washroom, we're just going to sit right there because we need to know what's going to happen because this is the highest point of interest and the most exciting part of the story. And then after the climax where the character is put under pressure, then eventually the character will make a decision, right? And then it will all unravel out and then we'll have the resolution. So the resolution is like nearing the end of the story. So the problem may be resolved or it may remain unresolved. So you ever watch a movie and maybe at the end, it's a nice happily ever after and everything was resolved. But then there are some movies or some stories or books where the viewers are left or the readers are left thinking what is going to happen. because whatever situation the character was faced with in the climax, it wasn't resolved. So not all stories at the end, there is a resolution. Sometimes in the resolution, in the ending, whatever incident or difficulty the character was facing, it was resolved. Or sometimes we just have that, that mysterious ending where we don't know. Yes, Denzel?
Miss, when you say reading books will help with the short story, right? What about watching movies? Movies will help.
Is that what they call a cliffhanger? Yes, Ravi, that's what they call a cliffhanger, where they just leave you all, or the suspense ending, where they just leave you all to figure out. But yes, Denzel, if at this point in time we're in March and say CXC is like in May, June, because we're not sure which date they're going to push it back to. So you can still start to read from now, Denzel. But watching a lot of movies.
No, I'm not saying we're not reading them.
No, but movies
let's say, right.
But exciting movies, Denzel, not boring movies, right?
Yeah, exciting movies.
Exciting movies would really help you all, because remember, movies were produced, or movies emerged from a piece of writing.
And what saying, Mrs. The way how the phrase, like the way how they speak, you would know to write.
Mm-hmm.
If you relate it to a scenario along those lines,
Yeah, so you could use your experience with a movie, or what was in a movie, and you could write about that. And even movies, you must pay attention to how movies start. Movies begin with the same structure. They have the exposition, and when the movie start, they show you all the setting, and then they introduce you to characters in the movie. And then after they introduce you to the characters, then some sort of complication or conflict happens in the movie. And after that, then we reach the highest point of interest in the movie, where we don't want to move. And then sometimes the movie may end where we feel satisfied because we saw a resolution, the issue was resolved. Or maybe sometimes it remains unresolved. So I saw two persons raise their hand. Denzel, you raise your hand again? Sanjay?
Yeah, like when you're writing a short story, you know how like some movies just start off, like they just say, like if there was any mid, like right that like they was gonna fight the bad person in the movie, like they'll say like I'm right there to kill you, and then it says, and then they say in the second line 7 hours earlier or something like that. You could write like that.
Oh, yes. And you're jumping ahead of me. Next week's class as well, I'm going to be teaching you all different ways in which you could begin a story. So what Sanjay was saying there is that sometimes the movie starts in the present, and then they do what they call a flashback, where they go where they revisit the past, and then they show you all the events that lead up to that point. So if you want, you can begin your story like that, Sanjay.
Okay.
That's a nice way to begin a story, because a lot of movies are like that too. And then when the reader, or when you all as viewers see the movie begin like that, you all are intrigued. You're like, oh my gosh, I need to see what happened for them to reach this stage. And then you'll sit there, and then after you watch until you see the part where the movie began, and then it's really exciting when you write like that. So when you're writing your story, you should always try to write it in this format. If you want, you could, because this is a standard format. But it's really good for you all to experiment with different ways to start your story. And next week's class, we'll be looking at some exciting ways that you could begin a story. So your story will always have to follow this format. This is like the basic format. So if you want to be creative, your story could begin in a whole bunch of different ways. So just to visualize what I said with plot, we have a diagram. So this is a triangle diagram. So this is a plot diagram. So we have here the exposition. So I told you all that this is the beginning of the story, where characters and setting are introduced. So if you want to write a story and you're looking for a normal format, a basic format, something simple for you to remember, you could use this plot diagram. So you could begin a story where you introduce a setting. So you spend the first 3 to 4 lines describing the setting, and then you could introduce your characters. Then we have the rise in action. So we go up, and it says where the main character faces a series of conflict. So usually when the story starts, everything is good. After they introduce some characters, then they introduce us to some difficulty or some problem the character is facing. So this is the rise in action because things gonna escalate. So this is the rise in action. Then when we reach up to the top here, this is the most exciting part of the story when we learn the outcome. So we call this a climax, and it's all the way up here because this is the highest point of interest that could take place in a story. So after the climax, we go back down, and now we have the fall in action. So it's the opposite. We have the rise in action, and we have the fall in action. So the fall in action has to do with events leading to the end of the story. So this is where we are nearing the end of the story, where things are beginning to unravel themselves, and all the bacchanal, all the commotion that took place up here, everything is beginning to simmer down. And then we have the resolution, which is the end of the story. And as we learned previously in the resolution, maybe the issue could be resolved or maybe the issue could not be resolved, right? So any questions so far on this plot diagram, or this diagram helps you all to really understand what I was telling you all about what the stages in which a story could go. No questions?
Can you from the climax go down, please? To the
Okay,
resolution.
sure. So from climax, go down. So after you begin the story where you introduce the setting and the characters, then we introduce some sort of conflict that's happening in the story. And then the climax is where, you know, the character is really faced with the conflicts and we're like, oh my gosh, I didn't see this coming. This is the most exciting part of the story, the highest point of interest, where, you know, you don't know what's going to happen. And this is where everything just escalates to full 100.
No, that's good.
And after this escalates to the 100% where you don't know what the character is going to do, then and you don't know what the ending is going to be like, then eventually different events will begin to unravel themselves. So this is the fall in action, where all the drama that was taking place, eventually we'll see things starting to unravel themselves. Maybe they will sort of resolve themselves, or maybe they won't resolve themselves. And then when we near the end of the story for the resolution, then we will know the final outcome. So if the issue that happened up here, if it was actually resolved, or if it was just left hanging for y'all to wonder and be like, oh my gosh, I didn't like that ending. I didn't like how I don't know what happened. And then this is the part of the movie where you have to wait for the part 2. Or the part of the novel where you have to wait for the second part to know what happened. Do you understand, Hema?
Yes, miss. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else has a question? You following? So now we have the evaluation. Good. So now we have the evaluation checklist for the plot of the story. So these are some questions that you could consider in creating a plot, right? So the first thing you have to ask yourself is, are the events in the story logically connected? So, you know, sometimes when you start writing, and even when you're watching a movie or something, you feel as though the different events or ideas don't make sense and they're not related to each other at all. So if we are reading something and you don't understand the connections, then it gets boring and complicated. So you have to make sure that the different events that you mention in the story, that they're all connected and they're all related to the bigger picture that you're trying to create. The next thing is there development in the plot. So development in the plot has to do with the plot diagram. So you must have the exposition, you must have the rise in action, the climax, the fall in action, and the resolution. Sometimes people spend an entire story just writing on the exposition part, where they spend a whole 3-4 paragraphs still describing the settings, still describing the characters, and nothing is taking place in the story. So you have to ask yourself if your story is developing, if it is progressing, and you have the 5 different stages in your story. The next thing is there a major conflict? So at some point in time, your character must go through some sort of conflict or obstacle, face some sort of problem. Because if the story is going too good and there's no bacchanal, it's not really exciting. We tend to get bored and we say, oh, well, this movie wasn't that good, or that book wasn't that good. But if there was some sort of conflict, some sort of obstacle to overcome, then it becomes really exciting and we are intrigued. The next thing is there rise in action in the plot. So yes, the plot begins steady, but it must increase with some sort of drama, some sort of build up to the bigger explosion or what's going to take place. The next thing is their climax. So there must be at some point in time the highest point of interest. And when I say highest point of interest, I mean that is this part of the story that is the most exciting. The part of the story where the examiner is like, wow, like, you know, I don't know what's going to happen now. This is what we have been waiting for. So it's like that part of the movie where you're like, oh my gosh, this is what I was waiting for. I need to see what's going to happen. That's the climax. Yes, Denzel?
Mr. Conflict can be where your climax is.
Well, your rise in action starts the conflict. So the conflict starts by the rise in action, but the peak of the conflict is where the climax is.
Okay, understand.
Good. Number 6, is there a change in the character or situation after the climax? So usually after the climax or all the drama takes place, maybe your character changes. So if the character was mean before, then maybe when we are reaching the end of the story, the character changes for good. So is there a change in the character or the situation? So sometimes after the climax, the situation could improve, or, you know, it could not improve. So mention if there's a change or not in your character after the climax. And the last one is the resolution appropriate or not? So sometimes the story would be really exciting or excellent if you actually resolve the issue, or sometimes the story could be superb if you leave that mysterious ending. So what I like to call that is that, you know, sometimes you have the surprise ending, and this tends to be the movies and the books and the short stories that we really enjoy. The movies and the stories where we didn't see that ending coming. So you have to know for different situations, depending on what the story is about. You have to know, okay, is a surprise ending fitting for this story? Is the cliffhanger, as Ravi said, fitting for this? So could I just leave the reader hanging there and not knowing what happened?
Yeah.
Or should I resolve the story? So you have to know for the resolution, what would be appropriate to what you're saying or what wouldn't be appropriate. So it all depends on the direction in which your story is taken. Oh my gosh, why is the center Ravi? I mean, yes, this wasn't supposed to be. So much for privacy on this. Right. So depending on the story, on what is taking place, then you would know, okay, maybe I should actually put a resolution to the story, or maybe the story will be even more dramatic if I just leave it hanging there, or maybe it will be even more excited if I just turn this entire story around and the ending is just a surprise ending that no one expected. So depending on whatever you're talking about or elaborating, then you would know which ending is appropriate. Any questions for plot?
No, there's no questions though.
Okay, good.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
And when you're writing these short stories, right, you have to write in third person or first person?
Oh, well, don't worry. There's a part where we're going to be talking about point of view. But
Okay.
for a short story, you could write in any point of view you want.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah. So the
Even
next,
second person.
if you can write in second person. Sanjay, you had a question?
Yeah, if you could write in second person.
Yeah, the good thing about short story is that it's not like argumentative writing or summary writing. It's fictional writing. So you could be creative and you could write in any form that you want to write in, as long as you do it and it really helps with executing the overall theme of the story. So if you think that writing from a first person point of view would be more effective, or second person or third person, then you decide which point of view you want to write on. So that's why I say that short story is probably the most exciting type of writing, because there aren't really that much rules that CXE has. And because it's fictional writing, you get to experiment in your writing and be creative. So this is the element of the paper that really allows you all to explore your creative side and just have fun with the writing. as opposed to the argumentative writing where there's, you know, the introduction has to be like this, the body paragraphs must have this and that. The short stories where you get to experiment with your writing. So if you're like an imaginative person or you're very creative, then you will absolutely enjoy short story. Any questions?
No, miss.
So the second element that you must have in every story is that you must have a setting, right? So I'm sure you'll ever watch a show and there was no setting. They didn't tell you all about the place or the time or the date. They always do, right? So you must have, Sanjay said yes?
Yes.
You watch a show where there was no setting?
Yes.
And how was that show?
Boring.
You see? So you must have that element of setting, right? So setting in a story plays a vital role. So it's very important because remember in your writing, the reader is not there with you. You're not sitting there next to the examiner explaining what you mean. So it must be written in a way where you describe precisely exactly what you mean for full effect, so that the audience could really understand and be there with you and imagine what you are writing. So it makes the reader aware of the place. So you must mention the place. So where is the story taking place? Is the story taking place on Earth? Is it taking place at a school, in a house? Is it taking place by the beach or even in space? So I must know the place that the story is taking place. And I must also know the time. So time has to do with time of day. So is the story taking place in the morning? Is it taking place in the evening, at night? Or time could even be the time of the year. So is your story set in the summer? Is it set in the winter? Or time could be like time period in terms of history. So is your story set in the past, in the present, or in the future? Yes, Sandra, so you had a question.
When are we gonna get this for homework?
If you're gonna get this for homework?
Like short stories.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have an exercise in the homework that I sent you all. I actually sent you all an actual short story showing the different elements as to what goes where in the short story and some questions that really get you thinking about how you can structure the short story. But yeah, you'll be getting short story for homework. So as I said, the time could be the time of the day, so morning, evening, night. The time could be time of the year, so like in terms of like seasons, is it in January, it's in December, is it in the spring, summer, and time as in historical time, if it's set in the past, the present, or the future. Sandra, I saw you raise your hand again.
No, I had taken it down, but I had already taken it down.
Oh, okay. And creates a particular atmosphere. So setting really creates the atmosphere, and the atmosphere also helps to create the mood, right? So maybe if your setting is a dark, gloomy setting, then it can really set the mood in your story. So if you're talking about something that's really sad or despondent, you wouldn't have like a bright, happy setting. If you're having a bright setting with sunshine and butterflies and rainbows, maybe it's because something exciting is happening. But your atmosphere usually reflects the mood of the story or the tone for the story. So the tone and mood in the story are conveyed through the setting. And as we said last week, I asked, I think it was him, I asked about what was tone. And tone has to do with like a tone of voice, right? So like if the person had to read it, what tone of voice they would use. And the mood in the story is the feeling that it creates for you all. So sometimes when you read something, you can tell if the person is angry or sad or shouting, so that's the tone. But sometimes when you read something, it puts you in a particular mood. So you start to feel sad, maybe you start to feel angry, you start to feel frustrated or happy. So the setting really helps in building the tone and the mood for the story. So like for instance, if you have watched a movie before about a funeral, or maybe if you're writing a story about it, they would usually create this dismal, dull setting for you all, because the setting usually sort of reflects the tone and the mood of the story. So setting is very important. So depending on the message of your story or the emotion you want the reader to feel, then your setting needs to match that. So features of the setting, the first thing is careful selection of details of time and place. So you need to be very careful that the time and the place that you use in your setting would really enhance the message of the story. The next thing is that credible and realistic. So realistic is that sometimes the setting we could relate to it because maybe it's something that exists in society, but it could be unrealistic as well, as in if you're writing something that's imaginary. But it must be credible in that if you are describing something that's real, I must be able to say, okay, yeah, I could picture something like this. So it's so there's like, yes, I really know something, a place like this. So I could relate to what this person is saying. The next thing is appropriate to the events or situations. So like for instance, if you are writing a story and they ask you to talk about a memorable or like the most exciting or memorable moment that happened in your life, you wouldn't begin the setting by where the story begins in a haunted house. That wouldn't really be appropriate to something that's exciting or memorable. Maybe the setting could be something more relaxed and comfortable where the reader will feel joyful, and maybe a haunted house is not the best location to have that effect. So you need to be careful when you're selecting the simple details like the location, the time, even the minor events that you all include in the story, but everything needs to be intertwined and related to have that overall effect on the reader. So the evaluation checklist was set in the story. So here are some questions that you could consider in creating setting. The first thing is the setting presented through description or through dialogue? So we'll be exploring dialogue later on. So let's look at the first part. So sometimes we could present our setting if you're through a description. So we could describe. And description has to do with our senses, our sensory imagery. So when we looked at what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you taste, what you touch. So maybe you could present your setting through a description where you just describe things using your 5 different senses. Or maybe you could present your setting through dialogue. So while characters are talking, they are actually describing what they're seeing. So that's what it means by you could present your setting through dialogue. So your characters could actually talk out or quote, and this is where you use indirect and direct speech, direct speech, where you actually quote what the character is saying. So you could use a character speaking, so through dialogue, to actually describe the setting for you. The next thing is the setting related to the action. So as I said before, whatever setting you incorporate in the story, it must be directly related to the overall action, to the overall theme or the message that you're really trying to relay in the story. The next thing is, does the setting create an appropriate mood or atmosphere? So you want your setting to be able to, it's cliche before, typically people say, you're trying to set a particular mood or atmosphere. And that's what I mean by, the location, the time, the place, needs to really be able to have some sort of impact on the mood that you're trying to create for the reader or even the atmosphere of the story. And the next thing is that your setting include time and place, which is a must. In your setting, you must say the time, and you must also talk about the place. And lastly, is the setting realistic or credible? So is this something that I can relate to? Is this something that I could believe? So that's what I mean by credible, right? If it's something that I can believe, if it's something that is sound, or something that exists in society. So setting is really important. And setting goes in your exposition, which is the beginning of the story. So when we looked at the plot diagram, we would have seen under exposition in the box, they said that this is where setting is introduced. So all these different things we're describing place and time and stuff, it goes at the very beginning of the story. So any questions on setting?
Nah.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions on setting, or y'all understanding? Is it that y'all understanding? That's why you're so quiet.
So far, so good.
Okay.
I think I want to see a sample story.
Don't worry, you'll reach that, Denzel. You'll reach that. We're reaching that today. Sanjay, so you raise your hand.
Because the way old primary school taught me to write essays,
You're
like
not writing like
everybody writes this essays in primary school, and the mark wasn't looking too good. So with one bright sunny morning and all kind of
No, 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 of course not. We're not writing like that. And we would look at 2 samples at the end. When I'm finished with this handout, we're going to look at 2 samples. Yes, Sanjay, what's your question?
How much dialogue could you have in the story?
Well, at some point in time, you need to make your characters talk. And for the first paragraph, depending on how you start your story, if you're writing the story in the sense that the first paragraph is where you create the setting and you introduce the characters, then the second paragraph can have like about 2 or 3 lines of dialogue. And then the third and fourth paragraph can have like 2 lines each, because remember, you don't want your story to become too overbearing, whereas with the dialogue.
Yeah.
You want to balance the dialogue with the regular writing.
Okay.
So you don't want to have too much dialogue or too little of the normal writing. So you want to strike a balance between them. But you must have dialogue in every paragraph.
In dialogue, could you like if it's taking place in like a country like Nigeria or like United Kingdom, could you like use their slang and stuff
Of
in
course.
dialogue?
Because remember, dialogue is where you directly quoting what the person would say. So if you want maybe in your dialogue, you could talk in slang, you could talk in broken English. Maybe in a dialogue, you're quoting what a French person says, so you're writing in French. So the dialogue is where you're actually quoting what the person says. So you could write, it doesn't have to be in standard English.
Okay. Cool.
Good. So the next element is characters. So some of us actually write stories where we forget to mention characters. And how boring is that? You'll ever watch a movie with no characters? That doesn't exist. You must have characters in your story, and you must mention them, and we need to know how your characters look as well. So the characters refer to people in the story and the part they play. So every character have a different part, right? So you have like your main characters, your minor characters who don't really do anything, and they must play some sort of role in the story. So characters cause things to happen by what they do and say. So characters are the ones who really introduce the bacchanal in the story, basically. Because depending on what the characters say or what they do, that would lead to the conflict in the story. So things also happen to them and they respond in particular ways. So like, for example, the climax. In the climax, the highest point of interest, maybe the conflict that's happening is centered around a particular character. So things happen to characters, and then you'll want to know how the character is going to respond to it, or how they're going to resolve it or figure this out. You learn about story characters through their thoughts. So at some point in time, and I want you all to remember this, I need you all to describe the character's thoughts. So let me go into the mind of a character, or expose the reader to something that the character is thinking. You can expose the reader to something the character is feeling. So describe the character's feelings, their moods, their actions. You could even talk about their qualities. So when you're given descriptions of the characters, you could say that maybe this person is responsible, they're selfless, they're brave. So mention their qualities as well. And you must also note their physical appearance. So this is where you describe them. But don't worry, I'll be giving you a lovely handout where I will be giving you all descriptions to use and phrases to use, because I know that everybody still want to describe the physical appearance of the character, like when they were in the standard 5 class. And that's not how we're going to write for CXC, right? So I'll be giving you all sample phrases as to expressions that you could use to describe all these different things. I don't want you to tell me the physical appearance. Well, the man was tall, or he was fat, or he was strong. There are better expressions and phrases that you could use to describe someone, right? So try not to think about what happened when you were in primary school and how you wrote when you were in primary school. All right, and it's going to go from 0 to 100, okay? So have no fear. I will be giving you all quite a bit of handouts with phrases and expressions and descriptions and stuff that you could use to describe feelings. I don't want you to say, well, the man was feeling angry, or he was sad, or he was happy. There are more exciting terms that you could use for that.
The man was depressed.
Yeah, instead of saying sad, you could say depressed, right? So this has to do a lot with vocabulary as well. And I'll be giving you all the materials, and I just want you all to learn them and incorporate them in your writing as well. So you'll have enough time to utilize that. The next thing is understanding their thoughts, values, attitudes, and behavior helps you appreciate the story. So don't you all really enjoy a movie or a book or a short story when you actually understand a character? You feel as though you could connect to them because you really understand their thoughts, you really know how they're thinking, you know their values, their attitudes, and their behavior, and you could relate to them. So this is what I mean when I told you all the word limits in the beginning, you were like, oh my gosh, this word limit is too long. But you see how many things you have to discuss. And when you begin to discuss, maybe you spend an entire paragraph just describing a character and everything about the character. And then you're like, wow, okay, one paragraph gone, which is 150 words gone already from the 400 words. So, there are a lot of things to cover in short story. And you would realize, as Sandra said, that the word limit is not really enough. So the evaluation checklist for character in the story. So these are some questions that you could consider when you are creating your characters. So is the character convincing, real, and believable? So you want your character to be convincing and that the reader should be like, wow, okay, wow, this person, I could really believe or understand what they're saying because, maybe they're persuading me to follow what they're doing or what they're thinking. You want your character to also be real and believable. So no matter if it's a fictional story writing or a real story writing, it must be written in a way where it's actually believable and you could believe that this character is doing this. So like for instance, there are a lot of movies where we see personification taking place where non-living things actually come to life. But then we end up believing it. Like for instance, if you watch Beauty and the Beast, in Beauty and the Beast, we had the clock talking, the teacup, and then the characters are believable because, depending on what you make them say and what you make them do, you actually believe that, wow, okay, a teacup could talk or a clock could talk. So no matter if a character is a fictional character or not, the character must be believable. And the character will be believable depending on what you make the character say and what you make the character do. So the next thing is the character round, well-developed, or flat, static? So in literature, there are two ways that we could describe characters, right? We call them round characters or flat characters. So a round character is just like a circle. The character starts here and the character goes all the way around and come back. So sometimes you ever watch a movie where maybe the character starts out being really kind and then all of a sudden the character changes and becomes evil. And then maybe after the character becomes evil, the character changes again and comes back being kind. So that's a round character because the character is well developed and the character is undergoing changes like a full circle. So that's a round.
Hulk.
Like Hulk. Yes, like Hulk. Hulk is a round character because one minute he's calm, next minute he's upset. So, so maybe a character could be round, always changing. Or we have flat characters who play one role. So if the character was angry in the beginning, the character remains angry throughout the entire story. If the character was evil, the character remains evil. So the character is flat, meaning straight, in a straight line. The character is boring. The character doesn't evolve. So maybe in your story, you could have round characters that change in the end. Maybe you have flat characters that remain the same. So they remain static throughout the entire story. The next thing, what conflicts does the main character face? So remember the conflicts in the story when we had the rise in action and the climax. And the climax, the main character is the character that usually faces the problem. So you'll always see that the star of the movie or the star of the novel or the short story is always the one who faces the difficulties and has to overcome the difficulties. You wouldn't really see a small or minor character undergoing a major conflict. You would usually see the main characters undergoing these types of conflicts. The next thing, does the character experience a change of mind or heart as a result of events in the story? So sometimes in stories and movies, we actually see characters changing their minds or hearts. So in your story, maybe your characters could have a change in mind or heart, and depending on the events in the story. So something happened in the story that made the character change. And just remember that change could always be for the better or for the worse. So your character doesn't always have to change in a good way. Your character could change in a bad way as well. The next thing is, what does the dialogue reveal about the character? So dialogue is when you actually make them talk. And when you hear people talk is when you actually, get a sense as to what kind of individual they are. So the same thing in the story. When you hear characters talk, you get a sense of feeling as to, you know, what kind of person the character is through their dialogue. Is there a motive for the actions of the story, of the character? So whatever the character is doing, so make sure and say or justify, you know, why the character is behaving this way. So is there a motive? Is there a reason as to why the character is always angry? Is there a reason why the character is always sad? The next thing is, how is the character revealed? So sometimes the character could be revealed if we use descriptions, we could describe the character, or a character could be revealed from another character. So maybe one character is talking and then they just mention the other character. So that could be how the character is revealed through dialogue or even through descriptions. Or maybe when the story starts and we go back in the past, we have a flashback. Maybe then we learn of characters. So there are different ways in which characters could be revealed. The next thing is the character given a distinctive voice through style and tone? So, you know, like when you are reading what the character is saying, you could tell, okay, well, this character has a distinctive voice. They're always upset. So the tone of voice is always angry or very loud. Or through style. So is the character speaking in standard English? Is the character speaking in dialect and slang? Is the character speaking in a different language? So it all depends on, you know, the style and the tone of voice that the character uses would be unique and reflect the character himself or herself. And one thing to note about characters is that characters don't always have to be humans. So I'm sure we have watched movies or read stories where the characters were actually animals. So not all the time characters in a story could be humans. The characters could actually be animals or they could be things. Like in movies like Cars, where they actually make the cars, they use personification and they bring them to life. So not all the times a character could be a human. The character could be the sun or the moon. Sometimes in movies we see the sun talking, the sun has eyes and a mouth, and the moon as well. So characters could be different things. It doesn't necessarily have, they don't necessarily have to be human beings.
Kind of like Toy Stories as well.
And even in Toy Story, they were toys. So characters don't always have to be humans. They could be anything you want them to be. But just remember that you must always make them convincing, real, and believable. So you could experiment and make anything a character as long as you make it believable for people to actually, you know, relate to where you know, they are convinced and they believe that this character is real. So how in Toy Story we are convinced that Woody is a character? Because the writer, the producer of the movie makes Woody talk and walk, so that we believe that, okay, this person is real because they have qualities that real people have. The person is talking and walking and laughing. So the characters could be, they must be relatable. So Ravi says like the bear in the big blue house. Yes. So like even bear in the big blue house, he's real because he's operating like a human. So we believe that he's a character. So any questions about character? Character, this part is fun because depending on your creativity, you can make anything in the story a character. Anything could be a character in the story for you.
Could our character have like two alter egos?
Yes. Do you know any characters that from movies or something that has alter egos? There are a lot of characters that have alter egos. Where 1 minute the character is good and the character is bad. You know any, Sandra?
Yeah.
Or anyone knows any character that has alter egos?
Yeah.
Who?
Venom.
Venom. So yeah, characters could have alter egos.
Looks
then-
like Sandra does really watch movies.
Yeah, I believe that. You know, I believe that Sandra watches a lot of.
No, I don't watch a lot of movies. I only watch new movies, and if it's Marvel, I'll watch it. But I don't watch anything else.
and you'll realize
But he's
that
the one who does watch movies.
and then you will realize that, you know, the more exciting a character is, the more wrong your character is the more people love the character. So when you're writing a story, try to have that round character that people love. And don't just make all the characters flat and boring and the same throughout. Try to make them, you know, dynamic, where they always change it. The next technique is dialogue. So it says dialogue is a technique used to create conversation in a story. So at some point in time, you must make the characters talk, right? The way we bring the characters to life in the story is through dialogue, so we have to make them talk. You can't just write an entire story and no one is talking to each other. Then the story won't be believable. So in order to bring your characters to life, you have to make them talk. So it is a natural and spontaneous social activity, which is true. We could just talk naturally or spontaneously, and we do it in social settings. So it is an effective technique for conveying a sense of reality and even immediacy. So reality in that, yes, you actually believe in the story because you know that they are talking and dialogue exists in real situations. And immediacy because if you want to make this story go along faster, maybe you could have conversations that could actually help to propel your plot or carry on the plot. Because what the character is saying contributes to the overall climax or the rise in action of the story. To write creatively, the writer must become the voice of the character, that is, to give the character a voice. So speaking from within the heart or mind of the character. So it's the same thing what I said. In order to make the characters real and believable and add much excitement to the story, you need to make the character talk. You have to give them a voice, and you do this through dialogue. So let's look at how we use dialogue. So dialogue serves the following purposes. First, it introduces a character. So if you want, we could introduce a character by another character saying something about them or mentioning them. It reveals aspects of the character. So when you hear characters talk, you could learn different aspects or different qualities of a particular character just from what they say. The dialogue could even create a setting and atmosphere. So maybe one character could actually be saying or describing the setting for you or the atmosphere. And dialogue could even set the mood in the story, because depending on what a character say, then whatever they say would be reflective of the atmosphere or the setting, and it could even contribute to your overall feelings. So if a character says something that's sad, maybe you start to cry. So it's like when you're watching a movie at home. When you hear the characters talk or their tone of voice, some of us, we start to cry. We start to cry as if, we right there with the character and the character is speaking directly to us. The dialogue even makes the story real and credible. So it gives a sense that, that this is something that is real, it's convincing because people talk on a daily basis. And it even gives a distinctive voice to the person. So maybe you know that, okay, this character always speaks in dialogue, this character always speaks angry. So it gives a distinctive voice to the person or the different characters. It brings the character to life in the story. It indicates motive of the character. So maybe by what the characters say, you will get an idea as to their motive or their purpose or what they want to accomplish in the story. The next thing is that it quickens the pace of the story. So it helps to, and this is the same point with immediacy. So it quickens the pace of the story because you could use dialogue to actually get the story going. So instead of you actually writing in third person what is happening, you could use the dialogue to actually quicken the story, and the characters could say what is taking place in the story instead of you explaining it. It reflects or develops the theme. So every story has a general theme, like what the story is about, and the dialogue could be used so the words that the characters are saying could reflect the theme of the story. The dialogue even advances the plot of the story, so it gets the plot going. So by what the characters say, the story can move from the rise in action to the climax, and then the climax to the fall in action. And you could do this with dialogue. And it also differentiates one person from another. So this is the same thing like distinctive voice, because by what the characters say, you'll be able to recognize them. So like sometimes in movies, when maybe you're not seeing a character, but you hear a word that they use, or you hear the tone of voice, and then you know that, wow, this is this character speaking without you even hearing them. So it gives a distinction to characters, and it even helps you to differentiate characters as well, depending on what they say or how they say it. So this is a checklist for the dialogue layout. So everything you need to know about dialogue and incorporate it in a story. So only the actual spoken words are placed inside inverted commas. So like for instance, in the story you may want to say, the man said to me, then you put comma, then you put open quotation mark, Sonny, may I come inside your yard? Question mark, and then close, and then you close inverted commas. So only the actual spoken words, you put them in the inverted commas. Number 2, the words of each new speaker begin in a new line. So for example, if you have two characters conversing, when one character is finished speaking and the next character begins to talk, you must begin it on a new line. So for example, nothing to worry about there, said the doctor. You take a weight off my mind, Chinta said. So these are two different persons. So we must put what they're saying on two different lines. So you won't continue after doctor and put what Chinta is saying. Every time a new speaker talks, you begin their dialogue on a new line. The next thing is that each speech. Yes, Andre?
Kind of like a script.
Yeah, it's kind of like a script, like in a play. You will see when a new person is talking, you will see begin a new line. Number 3, each speech begins with a capital letter and closes with the appropriate end mark. So whenever you are talking, whenever you are quoting what someone says, the very beginning must begin with a capital letter. So for example, open quotation mark, hey uncle, is this the way to tie the knot? Question mark, close inverted commas, mark asked, full stop. Number 4, punctuation marks, which are part of a sentence in the speech, are placed inside the inverted commas. And you all need to remember this, they are placed inside the inverted commas. As long as the punctuation marks are a part of the sentence in the speech, you must place them inside. So for example, Christmas gift, I said. So you're shouting Christmas gift, and the shout is part of what the person is saying. And this requires us to use the exclamation mark. So it must be placed inside the inverted commas and not outside. So I know many of you will have problems with this, but the close, if the punctuation mark is related to the speech, what is being said, it goes inside the inverted commas. And number 5 says, the speech is separated from the narrative part by a comma, even when the narrative part interrupts the speech. So you must always have commas to separate what is being said. So for example, open inverted commas, and if you can't open the window, comma, close inverted commas, she said, the next comma, and then we begin again. You're to come straight up the stairs, full stop. So even if it's within a sentence, if you are quoting what someone says, you must put that comma before the close quotation mark. Then when you said what the narrative part says, she said, you must put a comma again before you begin the next part. So this is just a layout for where the lines appear and even simple punctuation marks. So you all could always reference to this to ensure that you're using the punctuation marks correctly. And the evaluation checklist for dialogue in the story. So you should ask these questions when you create dialogue. So does it feel authentic or real? So remember, whatever the character is saying, you want it to be as realistic as possible. You want the reader to be able to understand what is being said. So it must be authentic. You know, sometimes you hear somebody say something and you're like, oh, that's so fake, or, you know, it's not believable. So you want when the characters are speaking that is very believable and real. The next thing is, does it belong to the particular character? So the dialogue, so whatever the character is saying must reflect the character himself or herself or itself. So then you would know that, okay, these words really belong to this character because this is something that the character would say. The next thing is, does it capture the right mood or feeling? So we use the words to actually create a mood or feeling in the story. So you want that when you make a character talk, and depending on what they're saying, that, you know, it really captivates the mood and it really contributes to the effect that you want the reader to feel. The next thing is, does it convey what I want to say in the best way possible? So when you're making a character talk, you don't want to, you know, use words that halfway expresses what you mean. You want what the characters are saying to entirely encapsulate what you are trying to say in the best way possible. The next thing is, does it make the character real and believable? So you want that, okay, if a character says this, that people will believe that, yes, this character could really say this. So like, for instance, if you, let's go with the Toy Story example. Would you make Woody curse in Toy Story? That wouldn't be real or believable because it doesn't really reflect what you know, what Woody portrays to the audience. So you wouldn't see Woody from Toy Story using profanities because that doesn't reflect or is not believable. People wouldn't really, you know, be convinced that Woody could actually use that word like this. So it must be real and believable. The next thing is, does it advance the action of the story? So you want the dialogue in the story to be used to propel the plot, to advance the plot in the story, whereas when characters are conversing, you really get an idea into the conflict that's taking place in the story or the climax. The next thing is, does the language match the situation? So depending on the situation, you would have to use the diction, the particular words, to reflect the overall theme or to match the situation that you are trying to say. So if you are describing a very hostile situation where the characters are frustrated, you wouldn't use words that are happy. You wouldn't use those that type of language to associate with the situation, because that wouldn't be a proper representation of the situation. The next thing is the language appropriate for the character? So you want the language that the character uses, you want it to be appropriate in that the reader actually believes that yes, this character could say this and is appropriate in terms of in terms of age. So for instance, if you're writing a story and the story has a little child in it, you wouldn't want to make your character say something that is not age appropriate as well, or gender appropriate as well. And the next thing is, does it reveal the character? So as we said, is that in order to bring your characters to life, you have to make them talk. And even for the readers to get a bit of an insight as to what the characters are about, then whatever they say should reveal some sort of qualities about them. So when the reader reads the dialogue that the characters are saying, it must reveal some aspect or some quality, some feeling or mood about the character himself. Are there any questions on dialogue? I hope that during this this extra week, y'all use your time to reread this handout as well, so that you really understand what each section of what each element and section of this handout is talking about, because you need to remember this before you begin your writing. That's the reason why we're doing this. The next element, which is extremely important, is conflict. So the conflict is a struggle between two people or things in a short story. The main character is usually on one side of the central conflict. So in a story, you must have conflict, some sort of bacchanal or drama taking place, and it's usually between two people or things in the story. So on the other side, the main character may struggle against another important character. So maybe the conflict is one character against another character. It could be against the forces of nature. So maybe a character is battling with a hurricane or a tornado. So some force of nature the character is battling with. Or maybe the character is battling against society. So maybe it's him versus society. Or even against something inside himself or herself. So maybe the conflict could be an internal conflict where the characters are battling with their own feelings, their emotions, or even if the character is experiencing an illness. So conflict could be a variety of things. It could be against a different character, against nature, against society, or even the character battling something inside himself or herself. So that's basically conflict in a nutshell. When I say you have to introduce conflict in a story, it means that I want the character to battle something. And this something could be any of these listed here. But the character must face some sort of conflict in his story for his story to be an exciting story. Are you all following thus far?
Yes, Miss.
Marie, you sound like you're falling asleep. Are you falling asleep there?
No, I just lying down listening to you.
Which is the first step in falling asleep? Lying down. Number 6 is point of view. So Sanjay, this is what you were talking about, and even Denzel mentioned this. So point of view, the narrator is the person or thing telling the story. So remember I said that, the story can be told from a person's point of view. Maybe a thing is telling it, or even an animal is telling the story. So by point of view, we mean from whose eyes the story is being told. So is the story being told from a little girl's point of view? So whose eyes is the story being told from? And in this case, it could be from a first person point of view. So whoever, so this is where we use I. So maybe whenever you're saying I in the story, the person who is I, they are the one telling the story. If you're talking about second person and you're using you, maybe that person who is you, they are the one telling the story. Or third person, when you use they or he or she or it, maybe there's a third person who is watching in on the conflict and just describing what they're seeing. So short stories tend to be told through one character's point of view. So in a novel, you have time to experiment with different characters telling the story. But for a short story, it's best, because of the word limit, it's best for you to let your story be told from one character's point of view. So pick one character and let that one character tell the story. So for example, a story can be told through a child's point of view or even an animal's point of view. So we've seen in movies before, we've seen a story being told from a child's point of view. We've seen stories being told from an animal's point of view. So like in The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, we saw animals telling the story. Even if you watch Lion King, you would see animals telling the story. And as Sanjay said, maybe even dolls or toys, as in Toy Story. So remember, for point of view for your short story, just pick one character and let that one character tell the story for you. Because of the word limit, we don't have time to experiment really and let multiple characters tell the story. So just pick one character and let that one character tell the story. Any questions on point of view? So we're reaching the last two of this handout. Number 7 says the theme. So the theme is a central idea or belief in a story. So it's like the main thing, whatever the story is about. So for example, some common themes found in short stories are love. So maybe your short story is about two people falling in love. Or maybe your short story is about friendship or even war or marriage. So maybe there's a marriage taking place. Or even a story could be about education. So it's set in a school and it has to do with the education system, etc. So what are some other themes that a short story could be about? I've listed some for you, but what are some other themes from your own reading? What are some other themes that a short story could be about? Let me pick someone.
Death.
Yes, Sanjay, death. That's a good one. Kema, what's that theme that a short story could be about?
Crime.
Crime, good. Jaden. Jaden.
It could be about awareness.
About awareness, like what type of awareness, Denzel?
Like, like a disease or something.
Oh, like a disease, okay.
Yeah.
Coronavirus.
Yes, Sanjay, you're gonna read a story about coronavirus. Yeah, maybe a story could be about that. Where is Jaden? Jaden, what a story could be about?
It could be about like a short story about an accident.
About an accident, okay, good. So that could be the theme. And maybe the accident could result in death or something, or sickness. A story could be about a sickness too. So remember that when you're writing a story, ask yourself, okay, what is the theme of the story? What is the main thing that I want to discuss? What is the overall theme? Like, yes, I have characters, yes, they're talking, but what is the main theme? And this is where we get into the classification of like movies and books. So we classify movies in what different themes or genres do we classify it in? Nalini, what are some different themes that we could classify movies into? Or different genres?
Suspense.
Suspense, good. So it could be like a mystery, a suspense. We could even say, Ravi, what's the next thing that we could classify movies into?
That's science fiction.
You could say science fiction, good. You could even classify them into like comedies or horror. So same thing with your writing. You could the themes would assist in you classifying your piece of writing So if it's a fiction or if it's non-fiction. So maybe if your story is about marriage or a real friendship or something, then it will be non-fiction because these things are real situations. But if your story is about like a war in space, that could be non-fiction because maybe in your story you have aliens and stuff fighting in space. And you know, well, to this day we don't really know if aliens exist, so we still classify them as fiction. So the theme in your story could really help in classifying your story. And once you know your theme in your story, it'll be easy for you to figure out what you're gonna write about. So when you get your question and you read the question, think about, okay, what is the overall theme of the story? What is my story gonna be about? Is it gonna be about love, friendship, war? So what is it gonna be about? And the last thing is style. So the author's style has to do with his or her vocabulary. So again, you see the vocabulary thing coming up, right? So the author is the person who is writing the short story, which should be you. So your style of writing has to do with, you know, the vocabulary, so the words you use. The next thing is, or even the use of imagery. And we have 5 different types of imagery. Felicia, do you remember them? Felicia, do you remember the 5 different types of imagery?
One was auditory.
So what you hear?
It was basically the 5 senses.
Yes, the 5 senses. So when you're writing your short stories, be sure to remember your 5 senses because these are the things that you have to describe in the story. So at some point in time, you must describe what you see, what you hear, and what you, maybe if you taste something in the story, what you smell. So imagery, even tone. So your tone of voice, depending on the kind of person you are and what your story are, you would use the appropriate tone or the feeling of the story. So style has to do with the author's attitude towards the subject. So depending on what's the subject that you are writing about, your style would reflect what you feel about the subject. So sometimes if you're writing about something that you don't really fancy, maybe the outcome would be a nasty one. But if it's something that you really enjoy, then maybe the outcome could be a good one. In some short stories, the tone can be ironic, humorous, cold, or dramatic. So sometimes the characters could use a little irony where something turns out differently than expected. Or maybe the characters could be humorous. So some of the phrases and the words that you put in your story could be funny. Or even depending on what the issue is or the subject is that you're describing, some of your style of writing could be a very cold one. So you ever read something and you're like, wow, okay, this person who wrote this is very disturbed because of the vocabulary and the expressions they're using. I'm really worried about them. Maybe they're very cold-hearted. Or maybe your writing style could be very dramatic, where you like to put a lot of hyperboles or literary devices. So as you begin writing, you will be able to figure out your style, and your style will be reflective of you and what you enjoy incorporating in your writing as well. So any questions thus far?
Yes.
Yes, Sanjay.
When will we be getting a break?
You getting your break now? Let me, Lyndon told me to pause the recording. Right, so in this question, a cold hand grasped his wrist as he slumped to his knees, write a story which include these words. The first issue with this question is that a lot of students, they read this question and then they just take the idea of the question and they begin writing. And then when they begin writing, they forget what the instruction says. The instruction says, write a story which includes these words. So what was written here, at some point in time in your story, I must see this line in your story. So many of you tend to forget to put that line in the story. But if you forget to put that line, it shows the examiner that 1, you have disregarded the instructions, and 2, it gives the examiner a reason to take all marks from your paper. So be sure the short story instructions are very, very short. It's not much they ask of you to do. So be sure to read the instructions carefully. And I wanted to read this story for you because this story, if you all scroll to the end, this story, every year CSEC awards prizes for students who write excellent stories. And for the May-June 2011 exam, this story won the best short story. And it was written by Nathan Benjamin and Darcy of Queen's College in Guyana. So every year what CSEC does is that they publish the best stories for that year. So maybe one of your stories can be published for this year. So let's read this story and see what Nathan interpreted this this prompt to be. So the little phrase that we see here, this is called the prompt because it's prompting us as to what story to write. So let's see how he interpreted this. But before I start, how would you all interpret this and what would you all write with this question? When they just gave you this line saying a cold hand grasped his wrist as he slumped to his knees. What could you write about if you get this question? Let me hear
Somebody
Jada.
grabbing his hand while he falling.
But he's fallen. But why is he falling?
He get kicked in his knees.
And what would the entire story will be about? A fight?
Yeah. It's kind of like the winter.
Or maybe he was sick.
Okay, so the person was sick. And what the story will be set in if he's sick?
Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Quarantine place.
Oh gosh. Sanjay, you want this quarantine and coronavirus? So remember, you have to create 400 to 450 words with just this one line. So Jaden, let me hear what you would write about.
It depends on like the scenario.
What do you mean it depends on the scenario? Jaden, this is the scenario. A cold hand grasped his wrist as he slumped to his knees. That is the scenario they give you.
I had to start reading because I have no idea what I would write for this.
You see, and this was the 2011
This is a tough topic.
Well, this is exactly how they bring the questions. They just give you a one line and they tell you to write a story about it. So this is where creativity comes in. Maybe this was a scene in a movie you saw before, you write something like this, so you take the story and you're going to rewrite an exciting story.
The one with the pictures just confused me. The most could just be in black and white.
Yeah, we were doing picture essays as well because the questions can come like this where they give you a prompt, or the second option is that they give you a picture and you have to write a picture. So we'll be looking at how to interpret pictures as well so that you could write the best and the most exciting story from the black and white picture. So anybody has any creative thing that they would write about if you read this question, what would you write about? Anyone?
I don't know, but I just get like the hospital imagery, like an old person.
Okay, so an old person in the hospital dying?
Yeah.
Okay, from what?
Lung cancer.
And whose hand is the cold hand that holding him?
The child.
The child, okay.
Yeah,
And
they're
so
just
you're
like
saying something?
not good hospital.
I was saying like let's say by the beach and he witnessed somebody drowning and like he went down on his knees and like a relative kind of like comfort him like you know, and then you carry the story from there.
Okay, well no, you had to carry the story from there.
But that's what I'm saying, that's what I mean.
Yeah, you'll carry the story from there, okay. Hema, what you would write about?
So this was telling you how would have write about somebody sick. You know, like how the sickness came about and what happened and how they end up in that situation.
And you think and your story will have everything. It will have the setting, the characters, the dialogue, the conflict.
Maybe because they might get to that situation because of somebody. So like somebody could do them something, or they could get in an accident or something in that situation.
Okay, so let's read this story. Let's see how Nathan interpreted this question. Yes, Felicia.
Miss, what if they were both performing and one of the performers were about to fall down and the cold hand was just going to grab him to pick him up to keep him from hitting the ground?
Oh, that's a nice twist to the story. So by you writing that story, I could tell that you're into the arts and and performing.
Yes, miss.
Maybe somebody was like doing the electrical services and like in a very dangerous place, like in a snowy place, and they have to fix something, and then he like almost fell off the ladder, and then somebody grabbed him
Mm-hmm.
because
Very
it was
good,
so
because
cold
you
that he
want to
fell
make
down.
the
He knew.
story dramatic and you want to make it exciting. So I can't wait to read your essays and see how exciting and dramatic you make the story. So let's see what Nathan wrote. So he put a title for his story named A Miner's Story. So do you all know anything about miners? Do you know who's a miner?
Yes.
Who's a miner, Sanjay?
Somebody under 18 years old.
I was not
Sanjay,
gonna say that, Jaden. I was not gonna say you.
No, Denzel, that miner is MINOR.
Ah, like a miner who just go inside of
somebody
the
in the field.
mine
Bums,
and they
bums.
just find like gold,
They dig,
diamonds,
Yes, it's
dig
a
emeralds,
stuff.
person who works in a mine, like who digs and stuff.
obsidian.
Yeah, it's like a
What?
person who digs, who's a digger.
Miss,
Yeah,
you had to excuse me. I wasn't watching the phone for a moment.
yeah, sure, Denzel. Felicia, what is the question?
I just thought of another idea for the story. What if someone was like about to fall off a landslide or something, like if an earthquake was coming and they're about to fall off a bridge? What if that person just imagine a hand touch him?
Oh, like Jesus, come down to touch that.
Like he just so will it to happen that he felt something on his arm.
Okay. Well, that would be a very dramatic story. We hope the person live. The person will live in the end. Or are you going to kill him?
I'll let him live.
You let him live, okay. Well, just remember, your ending, your resolution needs to, you have to pick a resolution that will really reflect the gist of the story. So the story can either be more dramatic or sad, or you can really get that effect if you let him die. So let's hear what Nathan wrote. So it's a miner story. So a miner is someone who digs in like a pit. So it begins by saying the gold-bearing plateau of the Guyana Shield is every miner's destination, but many times it is also their doom. The rainforest holds a hellish hatred, a demonic grudge against all intruders, and batters them, strangles them, and eventually destroys them. Amazonia is no place for man, and here nature reigns supreme. So in this first paragraph, what's the setting?
The rainforest in Guyana, miss.
Yes, Marie, you can tell us about this. He's saying that it holds a hellish hatred, a demonic grudge. Does it feel like that?
Yes.
So you are scared of the rainforest?
I know,
Yeah, I
but
don't like frogs.
miss, actually, I am from the rainforest, so I would tell you it's scary.
Oh, you are from the rainforest? Okay. So this is what he's describing, right? So he's giving us a sense of the setting, letting us know how this rainforest is. So the second paragraph is where he's going to begin to introduce some characters and stuff to us. So the men trudge through the mud in the sunken crater somewhere in the middle of nowhere. So again, he's giving us descriptions, right? All around them were trees in excess of 50 meters high, ferns, creepers, moss, and lianas. The world of vegetation was gray-green, alien to mankind, as the early morning fog hung low among the ferns. This team was here for gold, but man cannot tame nature. All of them, faces haggard and mud-streaked, clothes torn with dried blood and dark spots, their rifles and digging tools already rusting with moisture, were on death row. They had a fouled compass, no medicine, and half of the original 8-man team was lost, dead, in the middle of nowhere. So in this paragraph, he is painting a description for us of the men that he's talking about, and he's given us a little physical description of them, and he's even given us some sort of information about them that that half of the team is dead or lost. And let's hear what he's gonna say. Carl Royston, so he's given the character a name. Carl Royston shook his head, cursed under his breath. He was a young miner from one of the villages in the mountains, but he looked twice as old as he was now. As the men liturgically stumbled through the perpetual gloom in the barely penetrable rainforest, he glanced at Lewis, his number one rival. Lewis was a big, burly, bearded buffalo of a man. Lewis stared at him, scowled as they moved deeper into the bowels of the forest. Carl hated Lewis with all his heart, for reasons he chose not to remember. Now they were together, members of the same team in the heathen jungle. So you see here in this paragraph how they're introducing us to some sort of conflict. And who is the conflict between in this paragraph? Who doesn't like who in this paragraph?
Carl and Lewis.
Carl and Lewis. So we get an insight into the rise in action, because we know, okay, these both characters, they don't like each other. So let's see what's going to happen. It says, Hold Up Rapids was the call from Mason up ahead. A cascading torrent was before them, foaming white water thundering around jagged black rocks on the riverbed. Funny, he hadn't heard it before. Carl brushed it aside. He had a fever anyway. The rapids sounded as if the floodgates of God had opened, especially from so close. And you see the dialogue coming in again. It's okay, boys. Mason, the American prospector, said. We're crossing in a minute. So what's the difficulty they're going to be facing here?
His accent.
The what? What are they talking about?
The river.
Yeah, they're talking about like the river.
A little waterfalls like Miss.
So this is the kind of conflict that they're going to be facing, right? This is a conflict with nature. So Carl hated Mason's accent. Why couldn't he speak like the rest of them? He stepped closer to the edge of the water. From here, it sounded like a bullet train tearing through a tunnel at 300 miles per hour. He stared across the water that swirled with unearthly gyrations to the opposite bank. 50 feet of raging water from bank to bank. His head hurt, and everything swam before his eyes for a while, and he felt nauseous. The tumult didn't help much, and he staggered. So we're reaching here to the climax, right? Because what's happening here, this is the highest point of interest. They're describing this river for us, and this river sounds deadly, not so? And what's the conflict that they face with? They're going to do what?
Cross it.
Yeah, they're going to try to cross this river. So that's the conflict that they face with. And we have reached the climax where, it's like, oh my gosh, are they going to cross? Because they're talking about raging water from bank to bank. And now we're like, oh my gosh, are they going to cross? We want to know what's going to happen next. And then he's saying that, he's feeling nauseous. He's not feeling well because he just looked at this river and he's like, okay, no, I can't do this. So, you okay? Lewis' voice came. Carl glared at him and snarled. If I was... He began, but Mason cut him short. Okay, man, let's cross. So now we're like, okay, what's going to happen? Are they going to cross, or what's going to happen to them? Is he going to cross? Is Carl going to cross to them? Or is Lewis going to cross? Who's going to remain behind? The next few seconds flashed. Then he was knee-deep in foaming water. The rapids unleashed their full fury and spray flew, and Carl felt himself stagger under the assault and foundered. A cold hand grasped his wrist as he slumped to his knees. Water, foam, and spray flew as the big man, Lewis, hauled him over to the other side to safety. So you see how they incorporated the line here? What happened in here in the story? What do we know about Carl and Lewis? Not that they hated each other. And who ended up saving who in the end?
Lewis ended up saving
Lewis had saved Carl.
Yes, Lewis ended up saving Carl in the end. And you know, it's pretty ironic because in the story, in the beginning, the information they gave us was that they didn't like each other and they weren't speaking and stuff. And now Carl was faced with this difficulty where he didn't know if he could cross. And then in the end, there's a big change of events. His enemy, who didn't like him and he didn't like him either, ends up saving him. He would have died, he would have drowned in the river, but Lewis picked him up and carried him to safety.
I feel like Lewis want, because they go in to get diamonds and stuff. They must be working for a company, so Lewis had to do it either way.
He had to. And for those of you who were unsure about like the writing style and stuff in a CSEC essay, do you see how your writing is expected to be? When I tell you all vocabulary, it's not no joke I'm making here, you know. You see what CXC awarded as the best short story that they got? You see the vocabulary and the expressions and phrases that were used in this story? I remember Denzel was saying about his primary school, how he remembered creative writing from primary school. Denzel, what do you think about this story now?
No, the story is good. The story good. I think I am capable of writing a story like this.
Very good. That's very good. Because this
Miss,
is
but
what
what
CSEC wants.
I have a question. The line with Carl Royston shook his head, comma, cursed under his breath, full stop. Why didn't put "and" there?
For dramatic effect. Because if it was "and," it would have been read as one continuous flow, but the comma means that you know that we had to slow down. So Carl Royster shook his head, cursed under his breath. So that's how you would have read it. You would have had to pause. But if you put "and," it would have just flowed and you wouldn't get the dramatic effect.
Okay. Okay.
So like if you want to have if you want to add drama to a short story, you could put really short sentences because short sentences help to build up tension. So like when you see the sentences are like 3 words like I froze. All those short sentences help to build tension and excitement and even suspense in a story. So it's really good. So you really have to pay particular attention to where you put in the punctuation marks because where you put these marks is how the examiner will read the story. So you have to know where you want to add the dramatic effect, where you want to put the comma, where you want to put a full stop. If you add the word "and" to it, if it would really give the effect that you want to give.
Miss trudged is past tense for what? Trud?
Yeah, trudge. Like if you're trotting through, like if you're walking through something.
I know the meaning trud, but I've seen trudged.
Mm-hmm.
That's the past tense.
Yes, that's the past tense.
Okay.
So like if you're trudging through the mud, so you see the vocabulary words, you can't just say, oh yeah, well the men walk through the mud. Trudge really gives a more dramatic effect and it really encapsulates what the writer is trying to say. Anybody have any questions about this? This was an essay that won a prize.
I didn't really like it.
You didn't like it? Why? Denzel, trudged is the past tense of trudge. Trud is something different, but there is a word that is trudge. If you're trudging through something, it means that you know, like when you're walking slow, but then it's like the steps are really, really heavy and you can't lift your foot. That's what it means to trudge. So like you're walking slowly, but you're still feeling like this extra weight on you. That is the trudge effect. So like if you're walking through mud, you would trudge because if the mud is damp and your foot is sinking in, there's no way that you could just like sprint through the mud. You have to trudge through it. So you have to walk slowly, but your steps will also be very heavy because of the mud. So any more questions about this story? This is how we're going to aim to write. So could we move on to the other short story? Because these two writers, they wrote something completely different from this one question. So Sanjay, don't sell out my story, huh? So this story is the same question. It says, a cold hand grasped his...
I remember this one.
Yes, don't tell my story, Sanjay. So I want to show you all how two persons can write two completely different
So then the
things.
last one was. So you can do either or for exam then.
What happened, Ravi?
You can either indent or don't have to indent if you want to do for exam.
For your short story, you have to indent. In the one, when CSEC type it up, they didn't indent. But for your short story, you have to indent and you don't skip lines between the paragraphs. So this story is the same question, but let's see how they wrote an entire different situation. So it begins by saying, Chad visited his wife Deidre at the Dixon Memorial Hospital. She had been there for some days now. Both her parents and elder brother died from the deadly disease called cancer. She thinks it might be a family trait, and she too might have the disease. A few years back, she found out that she couldn't have children. She cursed the disease. She is convinced that the disease had deprived her of God's gift to man to reproduce and bless this wonderful place called Earth. So we see in the first paragraph, we get an idea of the setting. They tell us where she's at. She's at the Dixon Memorial Hospital. And we know that her name is Deidre and Chad is her husband. They're giving us a bit of, they're introducing us to a bit of the family history about her both parents and her elder brother dying from the disease of cancer. So maybe she's in the hospital because she's dying from cancer. Then we get the dialogue. How are you holding up? He asked, sitting at her bedside. It's supposed to be a space. With her black Asian hair against the white pillow. So we get some description as to how she looks. I'm doing fine. Deidre doesn't mention the pain. She doesn't want to upset her husband. Did you tell the doctor about the belly cramps you had been feeling when you were at home? She nodded. He said it might have been side effects from the pills I had been taking. Chad tries to comfort her. He slips his hand into hers. He looks down at her. Her face looked a bit puffy and pale, with black pouches under her eyes. He lifted his hand and wipes her cheek with his finger and said, You're going to be absolutely fine. Chad fears that he might be wrong, but he doesn't want his wife to worry. He thinks back. He doesn't want to. He can't help it. At times, good times, when he would chase her around in the house, and she would sprint off like an Olympian, squealing in excitement. He sat musing on past memories, not knowing that his world was seconds away from crumbling. So how are y'all feeling so far? Are y'all intrigued in knowing what's going to happen?
But that's someone
No.
already.
Really?
Not really? You're not really intrigued in knowing what's going to happen? Well, let's see. An alarming beep echoed in the room, breaking his meditation. It was the heart monitor, which was close to her head at her bedside. Each second, the sound became louder, stronger and faster. Beep, beep, beep. What happened next took him by surprise. Her hands began to tremble violently, and her body twisted and turned uncontrollably. Her palms suddenly felt cold, and that sent him into panic. He gave her hand a tight squeeze and began shouting her name. Deidre! Deidre! A cold hand grasped his wrist as he slumped to his knees. It was Dr. Frederick. Sir, please get outside, the doctor said. Get outside? Two simple words, but by God, it told him everything. So this is the climax of the story. We don't know what's going to happen. What y'all think going to happen with all reading ahead?
Death.
I think she died. Let's say she died.
Yeah, she kicked the bucket.
You kicked the bucket. Let's see. He felt a sudden emptiness deep within his heart. He felt as if someone penetrated a knife inside him and kept twisting it. He felt as if his whole world was crumbling and he was left to pick up the pieces. His red eyes burnt. He felt tears of sorrow rushing, ready to burst and fill his tear ducts. He took long, hasty steps, looking for a safe place to release the pain. He turns to the first door he embarks upon, pushed it open. Inside and on the shelves was filled with white bottles of medical items. I bet any of these items can get the job done. I bet one of these items can give me a quick and easy death. So what's happening to him?
Drug addiction.
He wants to kill himself. Because remember,
Suicidal thought.
we think that his wife died. And now he wants to give himself a quick and easy death. So he gone in the hospital in a room and he finds medication and he's going to take them. He reaches for one of the small bottle item, opens the lid, turns the bottle to his head, and gulped in a few pills. Not sure how much he took, but he was sure he could get the job done. No sooner in a few seconds he felt dizzy, and in a few minutes his blur was now in complete darkness. A voice he heard, a voice he recognizes. It was Dr. Frederick. Am I finally dead? I'm in heaven, right? But what are you doing here? He asked. The doctor gave a booming laugh. You crazy man. No, you're not dead. The pills you took were just some sleeping pills, and you're going to be absolutely fine. As for your wife, Deidre, she doesn't have cancer. Turns out that the cramp she was feeling is the confirmation of her pregnancy, and you two should be expecting twins.
Okay then.
So what do we know about Deidre and pregnancy? What did they say in the beginning?
That she couldn't.
It's a family cancer. It's a family trait.
Right. They said that her family had cancer and she's convinced that she had the disease and they're deprived of having the gift to reproduce. So there was no way that we thought that she could make children, right? And then when the panic happened in the room, then he got put outside and with the heart monitor going off, and then he tried to kill himself. And it turns out that, you know what, he just took some sleeping pills. And after the sleeping pills, when he woke up, when he thought he was dead, it was really Dr. Frederick he was talking to and not God. And then it turns out that, you know what, his wife is fine and she's pregnant, not just pregnant with one child, but she's having twins. So what do you think about that story?
What if he
crazy.
took pills and he died and she was alive?
Well, Denzel, that could be your story. Maybe that could have happened. You could have written this story in a way where he ended up dying and she ended up living. So how you think how would you all feel if the story was like that? He died and she ended up living with twins.
That's the twist.
That would have been a great twist.
It would have been even more chaotic.
Mm-hmm. And that's what we like when we are reading stories or we're watching movies. The more drama the movie has or the story has, the more excited it tends to be, not so? So when you are writing for this one, this was a story where they had a sort of surprise ending because we didn't see this coming. We thought that she died when the heart monitor went off and it was beeping and he had to go outside. In situations like that in a hospital, that only happens if something severe is occurring. So we were under the assumption that, you know what, yeah, she died because her hand was cold and, you know, he felt it. So yeah, she died for sure. And then we thought that, okay, he took the pills. Yeah, he died too. So in the story, this was like they both died. And then we had this surprise ending where he ended up living and she ended up living too, being pregnant with twins.
Imagine if the plot twist was they both die and Dr. Frederick had make it look like his wife was dying so that he would go crazy. So then he killed the wife after when the gunshot died, and then he robbed them. And then he robbed them.
My God, Sandra, so nobody was going to live in your story.
Besides Dr. Frederick.
Besides Dr. Frederick, who would have been rich? And a murderer. Still practicing medicine. So Ravi, I know I heard you say that at the beginning. When I paused after he got put out of the room, you said that yes, she died. How do you feel now that you saw this ending?
Well, it was unexpected.
It was unexpected. So this is a plot twist for you. This is a surprise ending. How you thought the story was gonna end?
First, we assumed that the woman died. Obviously, it's a plot twist, and it was like, okay, really?
So you thought she was gonna die and he was gonna live? Ravi, you thought she was gonna die and he was gonna live? Okay, I think we lost Ravi. So this was an example for you to see how students could take the same question and they could produce a variety of responses. Because some of you all, if you all wrote this story, you would write, you all wouldn't write, your stories would be going in the same direction. Your story will be going in a whole other direction. So we have two contrasting stories here. One is outdoors, in the forest in Guyana, and the conflict is trying to cross the riverbank. And the other story is set in a hospital, is a more somber setting, a more serious setting, and we don't know the outcome of this woman's situation. So you see how we could create two different stories using different styles of writing as well, because one story was very descriptive. The story that was set in Guyana, it was very descriptive. It paid a lot of attention to detail, and the vocabulary was excellent. And in this story, it paid more attention to propelling the plot, to ensuring that, yes, we had the setting in the beginning, then we had the dialogue, the descriptions, then we had the rise in action, the climax, and the surprise ending. So different stories could emphasize on different things. Y'all have any questions so far?
Miss, what was the word count on these stories?
Yeah. For the short story, you mean the word limit for C-Head?
No, for these two stories.
This story would have been within the word limit, the one for the one that won the prize, but this one went over the word limit by a few words.
You don't have an actual figure for the one that won?
Oh, for the one that won, no, I don't think that they let me, that they don't give me the word limit like this.
You can check it in Word.
Sure, Denzel. We could check it in Word just for you. You want to get an average as to how much you could write?
Yeah.
But Denzel, the word limit is 400 to 450 words. So how much you feel you want to write?
I just need to know.
Uh-huh.
I just want to ease my mind.
You see that word count in the bottom there? 514 words.
But he gone over?
514 words.
But he won. So
And he won.
Well, I guess if like this story going good, they gonna keep on reading.
Exactly. That's the whole trick in it. Thank you for bringing that up, Jadon. You feel when I examiner reading a story, the idea is to get the examiner carried away. The examiner must be so carried away that they don't even know the boy went over the word limit.
Nah, good way. I keep it in my word limit.
But yeah, but he didn't go over by much though. It was the word limit is 450 words.
So it's like 64 words.
He went over by 64 words.
Miss, imagine if somebody lie about their word count and put like 406 when they really have 700 something words.
And trust me, the examiner will figure it out. The examiner would definitely figure it out for sure. And the word limit, when I, like for summary writing, when I ask you all to put the word limit in brackets in the bottom, you don't have to do that for the argumentative essay and for the short story. Only for the short story, you're required to do that, right? So don't waste your time counting words in the exam. Only for the summary writing, you count the words and you put it in brackets, like 110 words in brackets. But for the short story, the letter, and also the argumentative essay, you don't have to count the words and provide the word count in the end. Right? You don't have to do that.
Miss, I feel I will still do it just to know that I not writing minimum.
Yeah, y'all do that because even when I corrected in midterm papers, a lot of y'all had word counts in pencil, and I was following your word count as well, seeing what you was like gonna lead up to. Many of y'all did that, where y'all had your consistent word count throughout the paragraphs. So y'all think you all could create a story like any one of these?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
I'll just
miss.
write an introduction now to this question. You'll be able to write it.
No.
Yeah.
Yes, anything is possible if you just believe.
Not really.
Yes. The introduction is only 5 to 7, like 7 to 10 lines, and it's the introduction. And the introduction begins with the setting, and you could introduce a character. So, you all think you could write an introduction to this question now?
No, me, miss,
The
I feel like I had to go back
discretion.
through the, I had to go back over the handout.
No, miss, don't do that now.
Okay, I went
Okay,
to
miss,
y'all.
I starting.
Marie started. I won't do y'all that today. I don't want to do y'all that today. I'll be doing y'all that next week. So be sure that for homework you'll reread the handouts and the short story and stuff, because next week I'll be making y'all write an introduction for me. But I'll be giving you all additional materials as well next week, where I would be I'll be giving you all a handout with different ways to start your story, even different phrases and expressions you could use in the story as well, so that when you're writing, you could reference the handout to put some nice words in it, you know, some nice phrases, because I know some of you all still do your descriptions like with using the phrases and stuff that you learn in primary school. So we don't want to do that. So anybody would have written this story, like a horror story?
Yeah, probably.
And where would your story be set, Ravi?
An abandoned house somewhere.
In an abandoned house. So good, Ravi. See, you have your start to your story. You can start by describing the house.
Like two
So how
people
would you
walking
begin?
on the beach and they find an abandoned house.
Good.
And what would if I
What would
started
our
the
first line be? If we write in an abandoned house, how could we begin the story?
I was walking on the
What if I
beach
just
and I
started
came
the
across this
cool
house.
hand grass?
I approached it with guilt or something. Nah, like you know that feeling when you're going up to something scary and you just get that feeling.
Sanjay, let's see how we'll start the story. Let's write an introduction. Everybody's gonna give me a line. You all ready?
Yeah.
I have
I'm
everyone's
going to
name.
write my story about the picture I just sent you.
I am going to start an introduction for you all, and you all are going to continue it for me. As I call you, you're going to continue it for me.
Go
Right?
in alphabetical order in names. No, there's somebody named Yellow.
Sanjay, stop giving us ideas now.
I have everyone's name. I
Why?
started. My story started. The monotonous gray hung ominously, threatening to burst at any moment.
What's that?
What's
Miss, you
that?
come back with that?
What's
What
what?
is that?
We're writing
Miss,
an introduction. Y'all know what I'm
Miss, you
describing here?
tell me about that line.
Nope.
You're talking about the rain.
I did tell you all about this line. This is the rain, the monotonous gray, meaning the sky is gray throughout. Monotonous means same.
Miss, you never tell me this.
And,
Probably wasn't here for that.
and this is actually describing a rainy night, okay, where rain is going to fall. So the monotonous gray meaning hung ominously, meaning that the clouds are hanging lowly and they are gray. And it's monotonous, it's same throughout, threatening to burst at any moment, meaning it's going to rain at any moment. So, Felicia, next line. Felicia, we're waiting on your line.
Look,
You can
Miss,
come
you
back to
typed
me.
in the chat.
Who is next? Ravi, you're next on my list. Remember, introduction, we're just describing the setting. We're describing the setting in the introduction, so let's describe the setting. That's gonna be a eerie setting, a scary setting, because we're gonna lead up to the haunted house. So Ravi, what's gonna come next?
Yes, I have my line, but it's not yet. It's when you approach the abandoned house that Rafi does live in.
Okay, we're not hearing any feedback from Ravi. Let's hear Nalini. Ravi trying a shot with us.
Right now, I don't know.
Nalini, you're next. Let's see Nalini here.
I'm really help with the brother right now.
Ah, Nalini, go on. Next on my list, Melissa.
A bright beam flashed across the sky.
A what?
A bright beam
A bright beam.
flashed across the sky.
Okay, so this is lightning?
No, something out of the ordinary.
Oh, okay. So full stop after sky?
Yeah.
Okay, Sanjay, next line.
I came across an abandoned house.
That's it? You don't describe the setting?
No, I came across an abandoned house that gave off a negative vibe. Or creepy vibe. I need more time to think.
Next word for creepy.
Scary.
Eerie.
Airy.
An eerie vibe, that's what you said? What's the next word for came across?
Noticed. Discovered.
Stumble upon.
After Sanjay, I have Jaden.
Miss, I could go back to like describe the weather.
But Jaden, we move from the weather. Well, okay.
That's right.
Where you want to insert a line?
I don't know exactly where, but when I start going around people, yeah, okay, that will work. The bleak wind blew through my hair.
The bleak wind
blew through my hair.
Blew through my hair.
Yeah.
Okay. The next person I have is Hema.
This is the Miss, I still thinking.
Hema, don't come with that.
Miss, for real, like I don't know what to put.
I'm coming back to Hema. I'm going to Denzel. Denzel, let's hear. You can tell me where I want to insert a line and insert the line.
Inserting it after vibe. Suddenly I heard a crackling noise inside the house.
So you're not going to describe the house?
Well, you say, okay.
Describe
I discovered an abandoned house. I gave one and wait, how you pronounce that word? Eerie?
Yeah, eerie. Eerie means scary.
right.
Describe the house to me. What you seeing? How abandoned houses look?
Black, rusty, dusty,
Hey,
and
this is
crusty.
Denzel time. Yes, Denzel, let's hear.
Wooden platforms or wooden platform. Mossy railings.
I just listened to what you're saying and I fixed it up.
Yeah, wooden platform, mossy railings. Uh, I know.
To that line that Denzel trying to.
Yes, Hema continued. The dilapidated wooden structure was overgrown with untamed vines.
Oh Lord, Father.
You tell me you wanted to add to it.
And was surrounded in mist.
And
okay.
And ferocious bats.
Like outside the house, then, so?
Yeah, the flying around. Remember, you stumble upon the house, so the sense, yeah.
With its windows.
Denzel, the bats will give us coronavirus.
Oh my gosh.
You obsessed with corona, yes?
Tema, let's say a line. Tema, let's say a line. Okay, the next person on my list is Marie. Marie, let's say a line.
Yes, I was working on two, but they all take my ideas, so I'm trying to come up with another one.
Shall I come up with another one?
Miss,
yes.
Said just now.
Hema, what you said?
I was saying why it couldn't be that the bats blew from the open windows.
Okay.
House.
Okay, so the bats blew from the open windows?
Yeah.
The house has windows in it?
Yeah, the windows were like just swaying with the breeze.
Okay, so the dilapidated wooden structure was overgrown with untamed vines and ferocious bats blew from, you mean flew? Denzel, you mean flew?
Yeah.
Flew from the open windows. Good, Sanjay, raise your hand. What you want to say?
I could put another line.
Sure, after windows?
Yeah.
Okay.
As I walked on the wooden deck, the floor made creaking noises, awakening more bats is what I want to try and put. Oh, wait, change it. The floor creaked, scaring me and causing
Okay, so as I
whatever
walked
is
on the
inside.
wooden deck, the floor creaked?
The floor continued to creak as I approached the door. No, as I made my way to the door.
Okay, so as I walked from the wooden deck, the floor continued to creak as I made my way to the, give me an adjective to describe the door.
Old, rusty door.
And
good, Marie, your turn.
Miss, I was thinking as you enter the house, the rain started to fall. It drummed on the roof.
How are you going to enter the house?
I opened the door.
As I cautiously entered the house, what did you see? Tell me what you see when you entered the house.
The rain drummed wildly on the roof.
Drummed widely?
Mm-hmm. Like wild mist.
Oh, wildly on the roof.
Miss,
Yes.
I think She put as the rain fell and drummed on the roof. Something.
I'm gonna start the second paragraph for you all. And you're going to continue.
I missed you. No, you never asked back, Felicia.
Oh yes, thank you. Felicia, I'm gonna continue this. Felicia, continue.
Boom! A lightning storm quickly approached the house.
Ooh.
A lightning storm quickly approached the house. Followed by another burst of light, drawing me to the window. And at my surprise, I saw
a zombie.
A strange figure standing in the woods.
Was it a zombie? Or a bug?
Good. Next person, Ravi, continue.
Miss by woods there, couple crevice.
Suddenly, well, she said that she is looking outside the house, and the house is located in the woods.
When you say it's on the beach?
Well, maybe this beach is not in the woods. You see how when y'all start to write, how you get caught up in the writing? We did say we was walking along a beach. Felicia said that she saw the thing standing in the woods. Felicia, you sure it's standing in the woods? Or it's standing somewhere else?
Could have been sitting or floating.
you saw it floating?
Or it could have been Jaden. Or Denzel.
Where are we seeing the strange figure standing? Standing where?
In the forest.
The forest is by the beach?
No, put the bush. It'll be more realistic.
In the bushes?
The brushes. Yeah.
Oh, by the bushes.
Standing by the bushes. Good. Ravi, line. Ravi, what happened after you see the thing standing in by the bushes? Let me start you. You see something standing there, right? So you want to know what's going on. Yes, Ravi, let me hear how you're feeling now.
I'm gonna run out of the house and jump in the water.
No, I want you to tell me, I want you all to describe your feelings now. After you saw that thing, tell me how you're feeling. So my heart palpitated.
Scariness. Scared. Frightened.
So my heart palpitated vigorously means that your heart is beating fast. As my teeth chattered louder and louder by the second. So you're scared. Yes, Sanjay.
After seeing the mysterious figure, I ran to another room in the house
Sanjay,
to look out the window.
Give me a line describing your feelings.
I was frightened.
No.
Yes, how about I was filled with emotions of fear and anxiety.
I was terrified.
I was terrified and filled. So we say what you said with
The feelings of fear and anxiety.
Of anxiety. It'll be repetitive but terrified.
yes. I feel the feelings of what? Yes, Angie.
No, I was taking on my.
So you see how much y'all came up with in just 10 minutes? And this is 159 words. Not bad.
My eye began twitching.
Mm-hmm.
My eyes. I think my eyes began.
Yeah, are they both
And
eyes?
I also started to tremble
Or
did.
it could be more specific. My left eye began twitching.
And shaked in fear.
Well, we said real fail right here. My left eye began twitching. My knees buckled up as I shook in. Right.
Disaster.
Is that shook in disaster?
Yeah.
So far we have 173 words. Not bad. Good attempt at trying to create a setting that was a bit scary. Maybe I'll need to read some more horror books.
Miss, I had sleep paralysis once, so no.
Yes. Okay, okay, Sandra, why not you? Well, maybe you could just like look for phrases online about how to describe a haunted house, feelings of fear, of happiness. I'll be giving you all these things next week when we explore how to begin the story and actually write the story. I did this exercise for us as a class to see where we at when it comes to short stories. So who feels as though they have some work to do from now till next week?
Me.
Aye.
So this exercise was, to give you a little check as to, how much work we have to do before we get there.
Yeah, I have plenty of work to do.
So feel free that during the upcoming week, maybe you could go in the past paper book. You could just find a random question and see if you can write an introduction or see if you can write the first 2 paragraphs for it or something. So just practice your writing and also start reading as well, because reading has really helped me with writing. So like how I know to describe my feelings and things I see and stuff. I really learned a lot from reading other people's novels and even other short stories as well. And you could incorporate ideas from them in your own writing as well. So feel free during this next week, you'll do some reading. Go on the internet, do some reading, resurrect a novel that you had, and start to read. What I want you all to do when you're reading is not just read alone. What I do is I read with a pencil and I underline like phrases that I like from the book, so that I could always reference the book and open the book and see the important things that I underlined. So you could try and reference, you could underline things. But if you want and you don't want to underline in the book, maybe you could have like an additional copybook or a notebook where it's like your descriptive book or your essay writing book, where every time you read something or you see a nice phrase or expression, a nice description, you could log it in that book, and you could always revisit that book when you're revising for CSEC to memorize, just to see the phrases and stuff that you could use in your writing. So what I want you all to do is see if you can get an extra notebook or a copybook if you want. And every time you read something and you like a particular sentence or a particular expression, or you like a word, write it down in that book, and our book would be like your little revision book when it comes to short story writing. And whenever you're writing a story, you can always reference that book, and you could look for a nice phrase to put in your stories as well.
So I have a book already. I have a book with the spelling words. Like, I used to learn my spelling.
Very good. Well, right, Denzel, in that book, you could add expressions. So, like, every time you see expressions that you like, add it to that book, and you could revise from that book as well.
It's similes too, and metaphors. Yeah.
And be sure to make sure and include literary devices as well in your short story.
Yeah.
So this is just an idea. Who's drawing on my screen? So this is just an idea for you all to see like how much work again we have to do. But don't worry, we'll get there. And as the time goes by, we would write stories together so that everybody could contribute and everybody could so we could hear how each other write. Somebody added this line: I made my way out the house and turned around to see the mysterious figure. My heart rose and began to run. This is Sanjay?
Yes.
I know that. You know why?
The spelling.
No. This common I at the beginning of the sentence.
Oh.
My heart rose and began to run. That's personification, which is good.
I meant to put my heart rose and as I began to run away.
Oh, you put my heart rose and began to run. So I thinking that your heart is personified and your heart is running.
Oh, no, I meant like my heart great rose as I began to run.
Oh, okay. I understand now. So next week we'll be looking at different ways to start the story. So we'll be
the plot twist.
Pardon?
The plot twist could be that it's the mysterious figure is Samir because he hasn't showed up to any of the online classes.
Oh my gosh. So if you want in the end, you could put a really nice plot twist. Maybe the mysterious figure could be anybody. Maybe it could be a long lost friend, somebody who was missing on the news and you found them. So you could add your own plot twist to your own plot twist to this story as well.
It's a family member house.
It could be a family. It could even be a family member, right? So that mysterious figure, you all could put a great plot twist there, and make that figure into something, something captivating and intriguing. So next week we'll be actually getting into the writing. We'll have you all write your own introduction, and maybe we'll jump into the first paragraph after the introduction. So I want you all to brush up on your writing skills. The handout that I sent regarding what we covered in class today, make sure you'll go through the handout, because all these elements, you need to remember these elements, because these are the things that have to be present in the short story. So the dialogue, the character, the theme, the setting, the plot, the different stages in the plot. So be sure to read the handout over again. And for homework, I sent you all I actually gave you all a story. The reason why I chose this particular story is because I like how it is mapped out here, so you can see what goes where in the story. So it says read closely the extract from the story and see the map of the story, and then you have to use for answer questions. So this is a nice pattern for you all to follow in terms of what goes in the first paragraph and second paragraph. So you notice in the first paragraph, they said this is the setting. Then they said, okay, the introduction, and then they introduced the first character. So you can see that in the first two paragraphs, you could describe the setting and introduce the first character. Then you can see the third paragraph is where you introduce the second character, and this is where the complication in the story starts. So you have a next character, a complication, and some mystery occurring in the story. And after the mystery, then we get into the dialogue, and we have the rise in action with some more dialogue. And then we have some tension in the story, which would eventually lead up to the climax. And then we have the resolution. So I picked this story for you all so that you can see a pattern. If you want, you could follow this pattern in terms of writing your story. So I want you all to pay attention to that. And I want you all to answer the 8 questions to me. So the questions are directly related to what is expected of you in a short story. And also, just key areas that you all would just bypass Thank you, Sanjay. And don't forget your capital I's. So I want you to pay
I had
attention.
stopped to put them and I forget.
So I want you to pay particular attention to the questions because the questions really help in mapping out how the story should be, which is exactly what this question is about. This essay is about. So the questions are directly related to the mapping of the story, and this is a good format for you all to follow in terms of propelling the plot and what goes first, second, and third. So I hope that this story could help you in that. So I want you to read the story for homework. It was already sent in the group, and answer the short stories on it because the stories, the questions are directly related to it, right? So do you all have any questions as we wrap up?
No, man.
So the homework that you have to do is that you have to read the story. I want you to also try to memorize, pay attention to the mapping of the story, what goes first, second, third, fourth, fifth. And you all need to learn that handout for me for next week because next week we'll be getting into the writing. And you can't begin writing the short story if you don't know the elements of the story and what goes where. Hence the reason why I gave you all the mapping of the story, so you'll know when we begin writing, what should be the first paragraph, what should be the second paragraph, and whatnot. Yes, Denzel?
Miss, my homework for this week, I can send you that tomorrow, please, all right?
Yes, those of you who didn't send your homework today, I'm giving you until tomorrow to send it because I don't want you all to rush down your homework and not do the homework properly.
Yeah.
So now that you all have to email it to me, just try to do so. If you can't make the deadline, try to do it like a day or two after the deadline, not too late so that I have enough time to correct it. So do y'all have any questions before we go?
Nope.
Everybody is good on what we're doing? This is a very exciting topic. I don't want you all to see this topic as being boring. It's a very exciting topic. And you know, just be sure to read the handouts, reread the short stories again. You could even reread the short story and pay attention to the mapping. Yes, Sanjay?
Miss, I wrote a short story. I think it was the day before yesterday. I could send it to you.
Yeah, you can send it to me. And if anybody else feels to write something between now and next week, you could write it and you can send it to me as well. Even if you want to just start with an introduction or something.
Okay, miss.
So be sure to do that. So do y'all have any questions before we go?
Miss, I send you a multiple choice, I think, you know.
Yes, Denzel. I have to correct that. I didn't correct it as yet because I have to do the answer key for it.
Oh, okay. Because I have a next one to send. I have June 2004 to send here. I can't see send my first one, so I didn't send it yet.
You can still send it if you finish it.
Alright, cool.
Yeah.
Right.
Anybody has any more questions? Okay. So with that being said, I expect y'all to use this week to reread the handouts, reread the board model short stories that I sent you all. And even with the homework, I want you to pay particular attention to the mapping of the story because it really portrays the plot in terms of what goes first in the exposition, the rise in action, the climax, the fall in action, and the resolution. So be sure to pay attention to how the story is mapped out. Because if you're looking in terms of format as to what goes in the beginning of the story, where the dialogue comes in and stuff, this is a really good example for you to see what goes where. So be sure to do the homework and answer the questions on it. But pay particular attention to the mapping of the story so you could get a bit of an insight as to when you start writing your story, how many paragraphs you have to write and what goes where in the story. So everything was sent to you all in the WhatsApp group already. So be sure to do your homework. Those of you who have outstanding homework, please send it. You have this week to send it. So please send it to me so that I could correct it and I could email it to you all. And as usual, if you have any questions while you're doing your homework from now until next week, feel free to message me, okay?
Yes, miss.
So you all have a good week and use your time constructive, stay safe, and use this time to really revise your work.
man. Later.
These
Yes.
days.